Thank you, Carol. Thank you. It's great to see you again. You've done an incredible job as CEO, and I know I'm so thankful, and I know this entire community and room is thankful for your leadership and for just bringing us together, as you always do, and doing it in your unique way. So thank you for that introduction. To the families, to the survivors, Tree of Life leadership, Rabbi, it's so great to see you again. Local law enforcement, my good friend, Governor Shapiro, thank you for those words, very emotional. Senator Casey, Congresswoman Osterman Schultz, Mayor, other elected officials, and everyone else here today and everyone else watching. It's an honor. It's just an honor to be back here to join you as we not only remember and reflect on the horror that took place right here on this hallowed ground, but to begin to build again, to look towards the future. I first visited this community in Tree of Life in October of 2020 to remember the 11 innocents, just worshipers, your friends, your family, your neighbors, who were massacred right here simply because they were Jewish. In 2022, I came back with my wife, the Vice President. We spoke with Rabbi Myers at length on how we can bring people together to combat this scourge of anti-Semitism and hate. I came back here in the aftermath of October 7th. I met with many of the families here today. I still think about that day as we all still process what happened on October 7th. And you shared with me, you shared your stories. We spoke about the pain that will forever live within you, the anger, the sadness, the grief that we all still feel from that horrific day. But we also spoke about great memories that you had. You told stories about your loved ones. We talked about the importance of rebuilding and the importance of healing. And on that day, I promised to you all that I would come back for today's groundbreaking. And I'm proud to be keeping that promise to be here today with you. I felt it was important to come and send a message to the Jewish community of Pittsburgh and to the country and really to the entire world that we must never forget. We must never forget what poison, what anti-Semitism can do, and that we all have a responsibility to stand up to hate, not through words, not through empty words, and not through silence, but through action. Almost 6 years ago, a white supremacist committed the deadliest attack on American Jews in our nation's history right here. 22 people were worshiping at the Tree of Life congregation from the various congregations. 11 of them would never return home to their families. It was an unspeakable act of terror, of violence, barbarism, fueled by anti-Semitic hate. And since the evil of that day, we have seen anti-Semitism rise to unprecedented levels. It is indeed a crisis of anti-Semitism that we are undergoing right now in America and the world. We see it on our campuses and schools, in our markets, our neighborhoods, our synagogues, and online. Students are terrified to go to class. People are living in fear, scared to wear their Star of David publicly because of what might happen next. Let me be very clear. When Jews are targeted because of their beliefs or identity, or when Israel is singled out because of anti-Jewish hatred, that is anti-Semitism, plain and simple. It must be condemned by everyone, clearly, unequivocally, and without context, by leaders and by all of us. Because no one should have to hide who they are. No one should feel afraid or ashamed to be Jewish. President Biden and Vice President Harris send their regards, and they are fighting back against this hatred and bigotry. They're working to unite our country, not to tear us apart. Last year, as was mentioned, under their leadership, Biden-Harris administration launched the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, mobilizing the full force of the federal government to protect Jewish communities. And I've been traveling all across the country and around the world, meeting with stakeholders, community and government officials, and Jewish leaders, many of you I see here today, to increase awareness and understanding of just what anti-Semitism is, who Jews are, and as was mentioned by Eric and others, to build cross-community solidarity, and so we can take collective action against hate. We've got to do this together. And this is not the work of just the government, and it's not just the work of Jews. All Americans must stand against anti-Semitism and hate in all of its forms. As was said, it is a poison on our democracy, and we all must be against it. And part of fighting hate and living openly and proudly is celebrating our faith publicly. And this is what I've tried to do since taking on this role as the first Jewish spouse ever of a vice president or president. And when Kamala, the vice president, and I moved into the vice president's residence, we affixed a mezuzah on the doorway. My parents came out. Probably the only time I ever saw my father cry in my life was when we did that. And last year during Hanukkah, we lit a menorah at our home while surrounded by friends and loved ones. And that menorah was loaned to us by Tree of Life. And it was also designed by Daniel Libeskind, who, what an honor to have him design this, but I also got to meet him in person at the Jewish Museum in Berlin, and we discussed this very project and his fight through art to combat hate and anti-Semitism. But that menorah was described as representing the vanquishment of darkness by light, which is exactly what we are doing here today. And we are turning what was once a tragic crime scene right here into a place of hope and inspiration, and a place that will be full of light. This will be a safe and sacred space where people can come together and put their differences aside. It will celebrate Jewish life and tradition, allow people to learn about the roots and manifestations of anti-Semitism, and help bridge the gap between diverse communities. This will be a sanctuary that reminds all of us that there is more than unites us than divides us. And that is what makes America great. It is a place where everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or religion, can live openly and proudly and freely as they are. Now, each time I have previously visited Tree of Life, I have left a stone to honor the memories of those whose lives was stolen. And today, instead of laying stones, we get to celebrate with the breaking of glass, which will be turned into mezuzahs. In this moment of joy, we must also reflect. The breaking of glass, the breaking, reminds us of the brokenness in our world and all that we must do to fix it. But it also gives us hope. And we all must do our part. We all must rededicate ourselves to embrace our faith and practice our traditions. And we must always, as Jews, live openly, proudly, without fear, and with joy. Thank you so much for having me.